teasing Justin Thoreau for his sleeveless shirts.
I was going to say he's never wearing sleeves. Yes,
Yeah.
that is the running joke of that.
Exactly. I call it the Happy Gilmore move, right? Like, yeah, I'm a golfer, but I'm really a hockey player. You know, like, directing is so important to me. I cannot come back and spend another 6 months on a show that's not going to get me there.
Okay, welcome back to The Hollywood Hang, a podcast about the highs, lows, and hell no's of this crazy industry. I am one of your hosts, Nick.
And I'm Tepper.
We have a very exciting guest today. Ben Semanoff is a TV and film director. Most recently, his work has been featured in episode 5 of season 2 of FX's The Old Man, episode 9 of season 3 of Yellowjackets, and Netflix's new drama Black Rabbit, starring Jude and Jason Bateman. Semanoff received an Emmy nomination for Outstanding Direction for a drama series on his work on Netflix's Emmy-winning drama Ozark. His other directing credits include season 2 of Showtime's critically acclaimed Yellowjackets, Tulsa King, starring Sylvester Stallone for Paramount Plus, and Hulu's Candy, featuring Jessica Biel. He transitioned to directing after a successful career as an A-camera operator. He was nominated for the Camera Operator of the Year for 3 consecutive years for his work on HBO's The Night Of and the first 2 seasons of Netflix's Ozark. His other credits as an A-camera operator include films such as Creed, Collateral Beauty, and The Upside, as well as TV series like The Leftovers, The Outsider, and The Affair. He is a graduate of Temple University. He currently lives in Doylestown, Pennsylvania, with his wife, Erica, and 2 children. Ben, thank you for hanging with us.
Thanks for having me.
I have so many questions. One, you guys have a cute crossover already because the actor that I'm most obsessed with is Riz Ahmed, and Nick just interviewed him, and you were witness to the transformation, I guess, that he did in The Night Of.
Oh,
yeah.
And Riz
Tell us
is
about
awesome.
that. Yeah, he's such a nice guy.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting to watch when people get those breaks, those opportunities to step up, and then to see them do it. So, I guess it from the outside, it sometimes looks easy, you know. But I'm sure the pressure that Riz was feeling was immense to carry that show. But he was terrific. And you know, I don't want to say that he was necessarily method, but for the longest time, because he would just stay, you know, I think a lot of actors that have to put on those accents try and just keep them going at the crafty table. And when I finally heard his real accent in person, it was like such an unbelievable shock, you know, because it's so incredibly different from what we did on the show. But yeah, Riz is a good dude.
I'm really excited about this because I don't know all the intricacies of like the camera department and like being a DP and a director and an A camera. And I'm really excited for everyone to learn along with me kind of like what the trajectory of that job and that experience is, because I also think, and Nick, I'm not sure if you agree with this, I don't think until I got into this industry, I really understood that there were different directors for TV episodes, the same way that people all think that like Shonda Rhimes is writing every single Grey's Anatomy episode. So we're curious, how did you get your start? And did you grow up also in Pennsylvania as well?
Yeah, I grew up where I live now. Spent my whole life there. And I initially thought maybe I was going to follow my mother's footsteps and study medicine. And somewhere during my college career, I had an awakening of sorts, and I was always into the arts. And I really I chose the path of filmmaking because I wanted something that would let me dabble in that. But at the same time, I was somewhat pragmatic. I was looking for something that maybe, you know, I could actually have a career and make a living and support a family and not sort of just be some starving artist. So that's really the what drove me in that direction. And on top of that, my absolute love of, at the time, film. I mean, TV wasn't what it was then, like it is now. I mean, that evolution really happened, I guess, in the early aughts. But so I go to film school. I transfer out of a pre-med program and go to film school. And really, after the first class, it was like I never looked back. It was clearly what I was meant to do. And when I finished school, I, like so many people, I packed up all my stuff into a storage unit and thought I was just going to head out to LA with a backpack and a few dollars in my pocket. And interestingly, because I had pursued that path of medicine, I was throughout college working in an emergency room in this small town, Doylestown, where I lived. And I would work summers and holidays and the it was funny because the nurses would say, oh, you're gonna make movies about surgeries. You're not gonna film surgeries, right? And I would go, no, I'm gonna be a director. I'm gonna, there I'd be at like 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. when things would quiet down in the emergency room, rolling the AV cart into, I'd sneak it out of a kid's bedroom, right? Because we'd have it in the kid's bedroom with a stack of Disney movies. I'd sneak it out, and back then it was all VHS, and roll into the nurse's station. I'd pop in whatever film I was supposed to be watching for school. And then when I graduated, it was interesting that the administration at the hospital approached me, because it's a small community hospital, and they said, hey, we heard you just got a film degree, and we have this brand new facility we opened, and would you be interested in putting a proposal together about making a video for this facility? So I thought, well, I don't have any money. I'm heading to LA. I could use some money. Let me do that. So I put this proposal together, and they bought it, and I said, okay, I'll stick around for a couple months and I'll do this. And then another facility, department at the hospital, the new heart surgery center, they contact me and say, hey, we have this brand new heart surgery center and we need a promotional video. What do you think? I said, okay, sure. Why not? I'll do that too. And sure enough, there I was, like all the nurses said, a few months after I graduated, filming surgeries. And
They
I thought to
knew
myself,
it.
they knew it. Yeah. I mean, I had blinders on, but, I thought of myself as this 21-year-old kid. I was, well, why am I going to Los Angeles again? Like, here I am. I'm making content, right? I'm not somebody's assistant getting coffee. I'm actually generating content. Yeah, it wasn't, the next Pulp Fiction, but. And so I stayed. My father retired. He was a salesman. I said to him, hey, I don't know anything about sales. Do you want to try and sell these videos, and I'll go and make the videos, and we'll have a business. And so that's really what caused me to sort of dig in Philadelphia, to plant those roots, and then eventually married my high school sweetheart, Erica, who I'm sure eventually is going to be watching this, and had two kids, Sean and Sophia. And anyway, so I stayed there and we started a business, and we ran that business for about 10 years. And really what happened was, throughout the creation of this business, I started to look for ways to sort of add value for clients. And one of the things I thought was, we were doing all these facility sort of tours, and I thought, wow, wouldn't Steadicam, which I was completely naive about what Steadicam really was, other than this idea that, oh my God, you can wear a camera and walk around and film things, and the camera, this was before all of our iPhones, which now have digital stabilizers in them. And so I go on eBay and I spend a small fortune on a Steadicam, and it comes in a box, like a used Steadicam, all, packed with recycled, bubble wrap and stuff. And I put it on, and I think this thing, I assume it's gonna be automatic, and I put this thing on, and the camera goes everywhere that I don't want it to go. And it was sort of like, camera pushes in, zooms out, my world is collapsing on me. What did I just do? And so I need to find a way to operate the Steadicam. And I signed up for, so I think a lot of us as kids do this, I stumbled backwards into all of this. Turns out the home of Steadicam is Philadelphia, where I live.
Oh.
Garrett
my
Brown.
God,
I did not
that.
know that.
Yeah, Garrett Brown was the inventor of the Steadicam in 1973 is when it first debuted, at least in the feature film market, and was used early on movies like Marathon Man and Rocky. And here I was with a Steadicam, finding out that, oh my God, this is where Steadicam was born. And turns out because of that, it's always been a home to Steadicam, and they had biannual workshops. So I go to one of these workshops, and there's Garrett Brown, 6'4", this magnetic human being, and teaching me how to operate Steadicam. And so looking to become a master of this thing for corporate videos, I fall in love with the culture of it. The Steadicam operators were these sort of like Renaissance people, where they were artists and storytellers and inventors and technicians, and it was just a really interesting community that really spoke to me. And so I obviously took all that knowledge to use for these corporate videos, but at the same time, I couldn't get enough Steadicam. So I started to sneak away from my responsibilities as an owner and operator of this company to go do a day on a music video, a day on a commercial, a week on a feature. It just slowly grew at the same time in parallel. And by that 10-year mark of running the company, I also had the potential of a full-time career as a Steadicam operator, and the two were at odds.
I love that, because I think so many people in our audience find, or like, and I just made a TikTok about this, get stressed about like the side quests that they're on right now, because like they're not, because this industry is in a constriction. It's very hard to make a living here. And I think people find their side quests to be like very defeatist, but like there is a lesson or like a sales, like anything about running a business or like program management, anything in the business world, I actually think is so applicable to working in this industry and surviving. Like, do you think you took anything from the owning a business and running a business that also has helped you in your career and navigating those music videos and getting to the next level of like the feature films too?
Yeah, 100%. One of the things that people ask all the time is, for advice, right? How to climb the ranks in this industry. And I frequently say, the most important thing is never turn down an opportunity to learn something, right? Whatever that is, you might have a 5-year goal or 10-year goal, but immediately in front of you is this opportunity to learn something about hair, makeup, wardrobe, props, whatever it is. I just did this show, Black Rabbit, and the head writer, Zach Balin, spent years in the New York market as a on-set prop. It was, and here he is, having written King Richard and Creed 3 and Black Rabbit. And so, yeah, 100%. Sometimes I get into these, sometimes I see these sort of young buck directors coming out of film school and directing something and, hitting the mark, and they're 24, 25. And I turn to my wife and I go, God damn it, I wasted so much time doing all these other things. And she so smartly points out, no, these were all the foundation of knowledge and truly I lean on all of that experience in everything I do. And it's empowering in so many ways, having run a company like you had mentioned, been responsible for, and accountable for budgets, not just sort of running into a project willy-nilly, but realizing, I need to, and that's really important in television, I need to remember that there is budgets, that the crew has a family, and that we need to get them back to it, and we can't just be here for 14 or 16 hours, and so we have to be accountable for our time. Every day it's all part of what I do, and I think you want to look back and say, why did I waste my time doing that? And you go, no, thank God I did. Thank God I did. I'm armed for whatever it lays ahead.
Oh, Nick, there's your soundbite.
Yeah, there's the soundbite. Back in film school, was it the type of film school where you had to choose a focus, or was it kind of like you learned a little bit of everything? Were you on the sort of directing track in film school?
we didn't have to choose a focus, but I do think if I look back at the course load that I elected to follow, it would have been more directing than producing or even cinematographers. More towards the directing. I focused on directing courses, editing courses, which I think, quite honestly, that's if you're just talking about, take away the politics and all the other stuff, that the people skills and things like that of directing, I think editing and understanding how the edit will evolve based upon what you're doing on set is, kind of really an important factor.
I feel like we've met a few editors turned directors, and I feel like they just have such a nice skill set to know like what is being actually made, and then they're like, what am I going to use and how will the story change when I see all of that together? For you, what was the connective tissue from being in Doylestown to being like, I now know someone in Hollywood?
There was not a lot of connective tissue. I mean, that's the truth of it is, just listening to you read the bio earlier, I got tired because it was it was a long and slow journey, and it's really one rung at a time. And each time you climb that next rung, you look back down at all the rungs that you've climbed, and you think, "Wow, I've got so far." But then you look up at an immensely larger volume of rungs that you realize, "Oh, I have still so far to go." And so the first approach, when I started to sort of break away from running my company and slowly sort of shuttered the doors and windows on it, was to focus on working on projects where cinematographers were coming into Philadelphia on small movies, commercials, things like that, and forming relationships with those folks and trying to really hang on to them. And so that would open a door to a relationship that might then require me to leave Philadelphia. And that really was the thing. It's like, okay, now I have this relationship with somebody that primarily works in Los Angeles or primarily works in New York. And honestly, at the time, it was more people that worked in Los Angeles. So how can I leverage those relationships into more work and more experience? And so I would start to go out to California, and that would be for a week or a month or whatever. It was really whatever scraps I could get a hold of to build my career and reputation. And at some point, maybe two things became true. One is maybe I had enough experience to not have to go to California, but also I had my second child. My wife had our second child, and it just started to become really painful to be on the other side of the country. And so even though that seemed to come easier in terms of finding low budget features or commercials or whatever to work on in California, I really needed to sort of like dig my heels in and say, how do I establish the same relationship in New York? And
how far is I don't know the actual.
Oh yeah, so 90 miles. It's an hour and a half. Yeah, it's a much closer marker. Yeah.
Oh, and so Black Rabbit was probably great.
Oh yeah, Black Rabbit was fantastic. Yeah. No. Anytime I get to work in New York is fantastic. For a long time after that moment in my career, it became, this is the only place I'm going to work. Because I got to a point where I established myself as a camera operator to the extent that I just didn't need to travel. I rented an apartment in New York. I would spend the week there. I would easily drive home on the weekends. Sometimes midweek, if we had an early wrap, I could go home and see the family. And so that was sort of the next step. But it was a harder market to break into, honestly. I don't know quite why. But once I did, then it seemed more like a private club than California did.
I think that's actually, they both have a lot of private clubs these days. But I'm curious, when you say you were like meeting people, making connections, what were the roles that you were being given? Because like I don't know a lot about the camera department and what the trajectory of each rung like looks like. So what was like the first role, and where did you end up like landing?
That's a good question. It's interesting. The camera department, not to get too geeky here, but the
Nick
camera
loves
department,
geeky.
the structure of the camera department's odd because there's no real ladder where one experience builds on the next. The second assistant is in charge of things that don't really teach them or arm them with experience to go then do what the first assistant does, which in the first assistant typically is pulling focus. So your second assistant has a slate and a bunch of rolls of tape. They're running around set, putting marks down for actors. They're clapping the slate. They're taking notes of take to take. They're taking measurements of camera height, things like that. They're also maybe coordinating all the equipment we need on a day-to-day basis. And the first assistant is on set pulling focus, right? Using the force, because it's probably the hardest job in the world, to control remotely the lens and tell the lens where to focus in space on an actor. And when there's a dramatic moment where we need to shift focus from one actor to another, understanding that the tone and the speed and the nature of how to transition that focus so that it feels like the audience's shift in focus and not some sort of mechanical it's an art. Well, you can clearly see that those two jobs are diametrically opposed, and then you have a camera operator doing something completely different. They've got a heavy camera on their shoulder. They're doing something very physical, and at the same time trying to ignore that exertion and think about compositional choices. Like I used to say, as a camera operator, so often I'm just thinking about shapes, not even actors, but I have this shape here and this shape here, and architecturally I'm looking at this and how do I want them all to complement and work together. And again, completely different than what that focus puller is doing over at their monitor, hiding under a blanket so that they're not catching any glare, and they staring, their face is 6 inches from a monitor, staring and making sure that they don't miss the focus. So the point is, there's no real ladder there. And for me, having run my business for 10 years and now really having taught myself how to operate camera, the only point of entry for me was as a camera operator, which made it very hard. Because although there's no ladder for experience and gaining experience and knowledge, there is a ladder for the relationships that you need to get that next opportunity, right? Like I've been a second assistant on 18 shows with this cinematographer. Now they're going to give me my break and let me step up and pull focus. That was a huge advantage for those people that tried to climb that ladder within the department that I didn't have. So it was very hard for me to sort of chip away and break in with zero relationships. And I remember I tried so many things too. And having come from this place of running a small business, what we did with the small business was we sent out flyers and brochures and things like that to advertise our business, which I just assumed was how I would advertise myself as a camera operator. So here I was sending postcards out to cinematographers going, try me out. I'm a great camera operator. And it was the exact opposite. It just wasn't the right way to try to catch their attention. Clearly didn't work. And so after loads of different iterations of marketing plans, I took this one where I just sent these very simple 1-sentence emails to as many cinematographers as I could. And it just really was, hey, I'm a camera operator trying to make it in the business, and I would love to just pick your brain. Can I buy you coffee? Like that was it. Out of maybe 200, maybe 20 replied. Maybe
That's
10.
That's like a ratio.
That's a good ratio.
Yes.
Maybe 10 sat down for coffee. One of them was a cinematographer named Michael Slovis, who is a very a successful cinematographer turned director turned producing director on shows. And Michael at the time I just come off, I guess, Breaking Bad as a cinematographer, and then he directed on that show. He sat down with me for 2 hours in in Montclair, New Jersey, and at a Starbucks, and said, "I'll probably never hire you, but here's what I can tell you about the industry. And the reason I won't hire you is because I don't know you, and I'd be taking a massive risk." But he sat with me for 2 hours, and a couple years go by, and these planets align. Michael is doing a pilot for The Leftovers, and the producer and Michael's regular camera operator is not available. So the producer says, "I know this person. His name's Ben Semanoff." And Michael goes, "Oh, I know Ben. Great, let's hire him." And so, like,
that was 2 years, though.
2 years, yeah. And so
that's a long time brewing.
And so that's really, to answer your question, how did I chip away and break in and climb those? It wasn't a climb. It was introducing myself and or luckily working for people that eventually connected on something else, maybe something bigger, hopefully something bigger than what I worked with them on before. And we're all, what's great is we're all trying to work on the next big thing, right? So if you work with a producer or a director or anybody on something today, theoretically and hopefully in 2 years from now, they are working on something bigger. So the opportunities they might be able to bring your way, hopefully will also be a step up for you. So that's a good thing, I guess.
And can you explain to our listeners, because it seems people are probably wondering, or people are probably thinking that the path is DP to director because it seems much more common in TV, but not a thing in features. So can you explain to people why do DPs often get the opportunity, or at least in the case you're talking about the Breaking Bad DP, and obviously that was your trajectory, and I don't know if that was a conscious thing you were thinking about, but why is that common in TV?
Well, I mean, that's a really good question, and sort of to return to something that you mentioned earlier, this idea of there being multiple directors on a show, right? So it's like, this is a common question I get. Just the other night, one of my very good friends for decades asked it yet again, because they ask it all the time. They can't quite seem to really understand, why isn't there just one director on a television show? And so the answer to that informs your other question about the evolution of cinematographers, because the reason there's not usually one director on a television show is because typically the scripts aren't ready on a television show. And quite often those scripts are evolving throughout the season as they see maybe, oh, this character we had such high hopes for isn't really a character we want to pursue as much. So that gives them the ability to sort of pare down on that character, or that performer isn't that casting of that performer doesn't quite fit. And God forbid, I'm sorry for performers when this happens, but you've seen that classic soap opera tale of people getting killed off, right? It is true. And so as these scripts are evolving, what you have is, let's say you have a director that's directing the first episode or the first 2 episodes of a show. They've read the scripts and prepared for weeks, and now they're in the throes of directing. And just now, those scripts for the next 2 episodes are ready. Well, you can't quite expect that director who's in the throes of directing to have enough time to prepare for these upcoming episodes. And so what do? They bring in another director. And so the evolution has been to have, a family of directors that are hired to do. Sometimes you have a small group, like 3 or 4 directors that sort of rotate. And sometimes you have a broader group. Let's say you have 10 episodes, you might have 10 different directors. So because of that, what becomes the constant on the show? The cinematographer. Because cinematographers are usually hired in pairs. And that's probably the best scenarios when you have 2 cinematographers hired and they can alternate. They're shooting, and then they're prepping with the next director, and then they're shooting. And because of that, if you have 1 or 2 cinematographers on a show and they become the constant, they become the most familiar with the tone. The producers see them there day in and day out. they, and to be quite honest, not all directors are created equal. Some come in and have an demonstrate an incredible understanding for the show, the story, the aesthetic. Others come in and they maybe don't demonstrate as much. And so when they're trying to keep these heroes, the cinematographers, attached for multiple seasons because they see what a great value they are, they're hand-holding directors that aren't quite, as good. And they go, well, we need this person back. We need Michael Slovis back season and season again. How do they attract them? They give them opportunities to direct. If they want it. Not all do, if they want it. And
interesting.
Some of them go, oh, this is for me. I need to hang up my cinematographer hat and find a way to pursue the directing. And some I've seen go, no interest. This is not what I thought it would be, and this is not what I'm suited for. And they focus more on continuing to be a cinematographer.
It's interesting. Yeah. I don't think people realize how much directors lean on DPs, like in features. So I'm trying to set up like my first small feature right now. It's like every conversation I have is people are stressing the importance of an extremely experienced DP, because especially for people's first feature, it's like you don't want it to also be the DP's first feature, because they need to like know how to make a movie, and you're going to basically lean on them for a lot. So yeah, that relationship, I think people don't quite know how important the DP is, and not just the framing. It's just like you have to lean on them in kind of every way.
Oh yeah, they are juggling so much of what is necessary to execute that it's important to really consult and rely on their input. It's valuable.
I think like something that's really interesting, just listening to that too, is I'm a showrunner assistant right now, and kind of learning even to the showrunner's tone, watching other writers try to match it. Like that's not an easy thing. And so to find the right cinematographer to keep it consistent, but then the directors to also feed into that, like that's just a very like hard balance to find for all of these different people to be looking at the same goal line.
Yeah, and quite honestly, to your point, so often showrunners end up rewriting big portions of episodes in order to make sure that that tone is consistent throughout. I know it's for the writers, it's probably frustrating, but most of them understand and accept that that's the nature of things. So yeah, to have a cinematographer or two that can help carry that aesthetic, maintain it, inform the directors. The director might say, hey, let's shoot this handheld. And the cinematographer steps in, kindly, softly, gently, and says, we don't really do handheld on this show. And if we do, it's usually only in these situations. If you really want to do it, it's fine, but just letting you know that's sort of the approach. And so that's really useful for directors that are maybe unfamiliar with the show. Some of them are so busy, if they're doing 10 or more episodes a year, they might be coming on a show and not even having had an opportunity, which I try to always avoid, but to have ever seen much of a show they're about to work on, and they're just sort of catching up. And then on top of it, you have first season shows where there's no rule book, and you're trying to figure out what the person before you did without having even seen it.
Okay, I have to get to one of my all-time favorite shows, and I need to know how you ended up there. Ozark.
All-time favorite. I like the sound of that. That's my sound. Yes. I recorded that, by the way.
Perfect.
So Ozark. All right. So I was to go all the way back. I was working on Leftovers, and with Justin Theroux and his friend Jason Bateman. If you listen to Smartless, you hear them constantly teasing each other, or teasing Justin Theroux for his sleeveless shirts.
I was going to say he's never wearing sleeves. Yes, yeah. That is the running joke of that.
Exactly. And Jason was coming to New York to do his second feature, his second directorial attempt at a feature film. And Justin recommended me to Jason. And so I went and did this movie with Jason. It was called Family Fang. And we hit it off. We just sort of had a easy time communicating. We had a similar aesthetic and taste. And Jason said, I have this TV show that's I'm developing. And at the time, like I mentioned earlier, there was an embargo on traveling. So I was trying to stay in New York. And he said, we're going to come here to New York to do this TV show. I guess they expected to shoot it in the wooded areas of Westchester, New York or something. I said, I'm in. And then a few months later, I get this text or email from Jason, and he says, all right, we're a go, but we're shooting in Atlanta. And I said, oh, buddy, no go. Can't do it. Can't, there's absolutely no need for me to go to Atlanta for work. I try and stay here with family. And he sent me this note back. It said, got it. It was very respectful. I understand. Families, comes first. And so I then spent the next 2 or 3 months kicking myself and questioning whether or not I made the right decision. But fortunately, he came back to me a few months later and said, we had been, I can't remember exactly the timeline of things, but we had been geeking out over text for a while about the night of, which I had been working on. And he had that must have been what it was. I worked on the night of, and then around the time of Ozark starting up was when it was coming out. And so we were exchanging texts and talking about the aesthetic. And so he comes back to me again and says, hey, okay, here's what happened. We had hired a camera operator, and they were on the show for a couple episodes. They just let us know that they're leaving the show because they're getting an opportunity to direct on another show. And I know, he said, I know you're probably going to pass because you want to stay close to family, but would you reconsider coming and being my camera operator? And now, coincidentally, at the time, I had tried a few times, crashed and burned on leveraging my value, like a cinematographer does for directing. I was trying to leverage my value as a camera operator for directing. And I tried it on The Leftovers, and I asked politely if I could be given an episode to direct if I returned as a camera operator. And as much as they wanted me back as camera operator, the answer was no. And so I left that show, unfortunately. And I had tried on a couple other shows, and it just hadn't worked out. And so here Jason was telling me that somebody was leaving the show because of this opportunity. And this was the first time I got the chance to sort of lay these things out at the beginning. And he had set the table for the conversation really nicely. And I said, okay, well, listen, I really want to direct. And I don't need you to put like ink to paper and say, this is when you're going to get to direct. But if you said to me, I will champion your opportunity to direct for the first time in television, I will pack up and come to Atlanta for the next 6 months and finish the show as your camera operator. And he sent me this he must have sent me this 2-page email back about how much he thought that was a great idea, how much he believed in it, and how he was already talking to producers, yada, yada, yada. And so I packed up, and it was the first time in years that I was on the road, went to Atlanta, and spent 6 months there as the camera operator on Ozark, helping to set a tone and aesthetic in conjunction with the great cinematographers there, Ben Cutchins, who had a very similar taste and idea for what the show should look for. But I brought sort of the camera operating, camera movement aesthetic that we had featured in the night of, and tried to implement it in new ways on Ozark. And I think that's why, if you look at Ozark, you can see a very sort of deliberate, clean camera operating aesthetic, very simple. And so that's how I ended up on the show. And then come season 2, he sent me a text, hey, we're starting up in October. This must have been September. And I said, when do I get to direct? He said, give me 24 hours. 24 hours later, he sent me a text and said, you're gonna direct episode 9 of season 2, which was going to be my first foray in directing television. And
Wow.
I was like, I'm in. That was it. It was so easy.
I have to say, one, it's not because what I think you like didn't skim over, but like that you asked a lot of people and a lot of people said no, and you were like, okay, like I'm just going to keep going. That I feel like is really what people get really beat down and bogged down. They're like, well, I got one no, like it's over for me.
I think it's also like, I was going to ask you, we've talked a lot on here about, especially in terms of like the assistant path. Like back when I was an assistant, I had a lot of assistant friends who were, especially at agencies, and it was like, oh, you never talk about what you want to actually do. I had really chill bosses, one of which made candy. So I wanted to ask you about that. But I feel like in general, you're not supposed to like, if you're on one job, you're not theoretically supposed to say, well, I actually want to be doing this. Could you help me out with this? And I think it depends on how much leverage you have. Like you obviously had immense value to these people in camera, but what do you think the balance is of like, no, sometimes you just have to tell them this is what I really want versus, oh, I'm going to like piss somebody off if I'm like, look, I'm going to do this job, but I really need to do this other thing.
Yeah. It's the, I call it the Happy Gilmore move, right? Like, yeah, I'm a golfer, but I'm really a hockey player. Like,
I love that. Another soundbite, Nick. There you go.
Yeah, and I equally get irritated when I'm the recipient of that. If I have an assistant or somebody that comes in hot and is like, "Yeah, I'm doing this today, but this isn't what." And there's an interesting balance. I think first and foremost, you need to demonstrate your enthusiasm and your capacity to do the job you've been hired for.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're in the process of interviewing for or trying to get hired for a job, focusing on talking about your interest in that job is paramount. I would advise against talking about your 5-year plan too much. I don't think it's a problem if you mention it, but I wouldn't make it the center of conversation. Show that you have the capacity. I operated camera for 20 years. I don't think I started talking about directing being my focus until about 15 years in. And then it became an aside, and I never let it detract from what I was really there for. And I only really would bring it up after I had endeared myself to, let's say, a director as a camera operator, showed them my value as a camera operator, and then they'll go, "Oh, wow, thank you. That you've been really helpful." And I go, "Oh yeah, no problem. I'm really hoping to direct. Is there anything you can, any advice you can give me to get there?" So that's first and foremost. But then just to step back, to talk about the no's that come. They're hard, right? And you're going to get a bunch of no's. And I think the thing that I really tried to do, and this only came from out of the fact that I had plenty of work, right? I had attained a level in my career as a camera operator where if I were to sort of excuse myself from a job after the first season, I wasn't worried that another job wasn't, in the making. And because of that, if they said no, I made it clear to them and everybody else in the industry that this wasn't this wasn't a hobby, right? I wasn't looking to direct as a sort of, let me see, this was where I wanted to drive my career. And if you weren't part of that solution, I would need to move on and spend my time elsewhere in order to get there. And so I think that was important, because it would demonstrate over and over and over again and eventually showed people like Jason, oh, this guy's serious. And fortunately, he was friends with Thoreau, and I had left The Leftovers, and I'd had conversations with Justin. Justin had called me for season 2. It was really, really heartwarming that he would get on the phone and say, buddy, how do we get you on season 2? And I said, man, I am so sorry, but directing is so important to me. I cannot come back and spend another 6 months on a show that's not going to get me there. And so Jason and Justin had that relationship. I don't know if they talked about it, but when I said it to Jason, he realized this is important, and this will be the thing that gets me to Atlanta for 6 months, and ultimately got me to Atlanta for 5 years, because I would go back for season 2 and season 3 and work on Outsider and all these other projects that were only happening in Atlanta, and it's Stranger Things, which then eventually led to second unit directing on Stranger Things. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
I mean, it's just kind of like, I think I just really appreciate like that you were like, I'm so good. I am really good at my job, and this is the job I'm going to be great at. But like, I do actually have a personal plan for myself, and I'm going to stick to it. Because I was just telling Nick yesterday, I think I was like, there's like this new showrunner that's looking for an assistant, but someone's already told me that they don't promote. So I right now, I feel like a luxury to be like, I could just learn from them and watch them how they run a show, and that would be interesting enough for me. I'm like, but for the time that like I know I want to keep moving up, I'm like, that's just not the person I'm gonna go work with. And I feel like it's hard. The show that I was discussing is so effing cool, but I was like, but it could just be a delay.
It could, right? And I think there's something like, I don't know what it is, like an energy or a vibe or things that are sort of undercurrents to that decision that also drive you in the direction of like-minded people without you even knowing it, and in the direction of people that you want to work for, right? Like people that promote from within, I think are like really wonderful, kind people. And like, I'm not trying to be critical of those people that just don't promote. And I know we're not naming names here, but I think it's so incredibly, it's so amazing, right? So Jason gave me that opportunity to direct. And I'm sure his hope was that I would continue to operate for him for the rest of his life. Because we had this great relationship. And I did continue to operate for season 3, and I directed again. And then season 4 came around, and they offered me the same situation: come and operate camera for the season, and you can direct. And I said, I can't do that, because I'm gonna now be working for another 6-7 months and yield only 1 episode of television. I think I need to give myself space for maybe other opportunities. I was actually lucky because COVID happened right around then. And that 6-7 months turned into a season that took them a year to complete and was 14 episodes long instead of 10 episodes long. So that was all just luck. But that was a hard conversation to have with somebody that gave me the leg up, gave me the first 2 episodes of my career to direct, and then I was turning around and saying, I can't come back and do something you originally hired me to do. And I'm sure it strained our relationship a little bit, but ultimately, if you look at the complete timeline now, he returned to me back in December of 23, I guess it was, and said, hey, I'm interested in you coming and directing only on this new show, Black Rabbit. And so I just think that's the archetype for the people you want to work for, the people that like they value your contribution, but they care about giving you the opportunities if you're deserving of them. And then when they do give you those opportunities, they eventually come to terms with letting you go, do that, and having to then rebuild a new relationship with somebody else that was doing, I mean, that's why it's so hard to break into this industry, right? It's so hard because once somebody finds somebody that they can rely on, that's it. That person is a permanent installment in their team until they move on, retire, or die. That's it. So there's not a lot of doors that open up. So it's tough.
It's interesting. Sorry, I was just going to say, because we talked earlier about how you're going to hear no, but it's almost like you got to the next phase of your career by saying no. And I think like a lot of people talk about like in screenwriting, like when I'm pitching on something, I know a lot of people who get big rewrites and they kind of come in kind of with that attitude of like, this script is in horrible condition. Hire me or don't hire me. Like there's a kind of like a psychological game that you have to play, which I think applies to many jobs and human interactions, but it's like there is power in saying no. Because at the beginning of most of our careers, we're kind of in the desperate phase of like, I need anything, I'll take anything. And like, people can feel that and read that,
Yeah. And honestly, for all your listeners, that sort of desperation, I would say it's hard to ever shake. It's a feast or famine industry. I'll go and work for 6, 7, 8 months in a row and feel like I'm on the top of the world. And then suddenly I don't have anything for 5 months. And I'm calling my agents and manager and going, where's the work? And then I start to get desperate. I go, give me anything. Give me anything. I don't care what it is. And then they have to be the ones to go, no. We have a plan. We're not going to take just anything. And that hurts. It's financially difficult when you have, especially when you have a family, you have mouths to feed, college to pay for, things like that. So saying no is really tough, but sometimes it's really important to be able to do it. But, I had a friend, a very good friend, Liam Sinnott, who was the focus puller on Ozark, and an incredible focus puller. And he said to me one day after all of this, after I guess I sort of had really hit that stride in my directing career, and he said something like, buddy, you made every right decision, along the way, talking about these moments where I had to have hard conversations with Jason and just all these little decisions that he was aware of. And I said to him, on the other side of it, none of it felt right. When I was having to get on the phone and say to Jason, I can't come back for season 4, and there was no like, I wasn't like, this is the right move. Wait till you see how this turns out. I hung up and I went, oh man, was that the right move? And I questioned that until finally something churned up that made it feel like, oh, thank God I left myself open for that. But it's those turning things down it is certainly, like you said, Nick, like a muscle that you have to develop. But it's, even when you're doing it, it still feels like it takes a lot of effort.
Okay, Nick, I wanted you to be able to ask about candy, because I'm definitely gonna really heavy, because I want to talk about Black Rabbit, but I also want to be like, you got an Emmy nom. What does that look like to your career? So Nick, you go first.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, we've been kind of talking about like mentors and people that help you. So Nick Antosca was sort of my someone that early on, I mean, even when I was in film school, I loved his show that he made called Channel Zero. And he was one of the big swings that I took of just like, could I just reach out to this person and ask to get coffee for 5 minutes? And then, that turned into, when the opportunity came, they started that company. I was the first call. And so I was their guy for a while, and it was great. And just seeing, like, I mean, they have like a TV empire now, but yeah, I love that show. And I love that they've been, I mean, ever since The Act, kind of able to elevate those characters with those actresses, and Patricia Arquette and Jessica Biel. So I was just going to ask how it was on that show.
That show is great. Nick and Robin and Mike Uppendahl, who is the producing director on the show, they, like many of my favorite shows, really created an environment that empowered the directors, and you never felt like there was this committee sort of looming and questioning every decision you made. They really said, you're the director of this episode. It was a short run. It was like 5 episodes, and do it. Do your thing, take the reins. Similarly, Jason has that approach on Ozark and Black Rabbit and Outsider. It's like, as much as TV is a writer's medium, they understand the value of the interpretation, the value of the direction, and hire really good directors and then let them do their thing. So big fan of Nick's and his shows, and would say yes, in a heartbeat to any other opportunity to work with him and Robin, and Mike, who great director. He did this episode of the Menendez brothers show, the monster show. I don't know if you saw it, and it's the episode where Eric is he's confessing to everything that transpired to his lawyer, and it's just the camera just moves in over whatever it is, 40 minutes, just one long shot. And what a performance. I mean, it was amazing. So really, really courageous direction there. So I love it.
We'll soundbite that for you, and you can send that to them to be like, if you're ever looking for a job, you're like, hey guys.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so I want to talk about, did you get an agent off of Ozark, or did you already have someone kind of putting you out there as a director? What did the process of that look like?
I got an agent off of the first episode of Ozark. I had no real connection to any agencies. Actually, interestingly, before Ozark dropped, I had directed Ozark, but it hadn't come out yet. And a friend of mine was a cinematographer, coincidentally at Gersh, had an agent, connected me with that agent, who then connected me to another agent that would have been more appropriate. And I went and had coffee with her, and it was like, there's nothing has come out that has your name as director. There's not much I can do for you. She was very, very nice, but it was like, no. And then,
whoa, okay.
Yeah. And then a few months later, Ozark drops, and I get a call out of nowhere or email or something from an agent, junior agent over at Gersh named Adam Van Dusen, who was the first person from an agent managerial side of things to reach out to me. And had a meeting with him and another agent there, Abram Malbotsky, and really nice meeting. And then I thought, well, if they're interested, other people will be interested, right? And then I found my way into meetings at a lot of other agencies, and they weren't as interested. One episode, okay. But Abram and Adam really seemed to be like fans. I thought, well, these guys are really, they're cheerleaders already. Why wouldn't I go with them? Why am I, it's like that Woody Allen thing of like, wanting to be a member of a club that doesn't want you as a member, These guys wanted me as a member. So I said, okay. And they were at Gersh, who I had originally met with, and had said no. So, so that was after the first episode. And then I started getting calls, emails from a woman named Dana Jackson, who was a manager. And I kept going like, I didn't know anything about the business. I go, wait, so these folks at Gersh are going to take 10%, and you want to manage me and take another 10%. And I was like, why would I do that? That's so much money. But she kept calling. And at the end of every call, I felt really good about her, regardless of whether or not I was going to hire her. I just thought, wait, another cheerleader, another person that seems to truly believe in me. On top of which, I don't live in California. Now, this was pre COVID, right? And so if we can all, stretch and reach back in our minds, pre-COVID, nobody was having Zoom meetings. Like this kind of thing didn't really exist. And so I would have to go to California to meet with people and have general meetings and get my name out there. And so 2 or 3 times a year, I'd be doing that. I take week-long trips to California to take meetings. And so the point is, for 49 weeks out of the year, I wasn't in California, and I wanted to have people sort of like saying my name. And I thought, well, yeah, it's going to cost me twice as much in commissions, but now I have 2 different organizations, 2 different sets of people saying my name over and over and over again to people. And maybe if one person hears my name and then a week later they hear it from somebody else, just coincidentally, it'll help. So I thought, boy, this Dana person's really great. Let me try it. So it's been a great relationship between Gersh and Dana, who's over at Echo Lake. I'll give them a plug. But it did come from that first episode.
Perfect. I want to jump into Black Rabbit next, and
great.
Sadly skip over Yellowjackets, but that's I'll
come back on later.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Perfect. Yes. Okay. So I think like that is kind of what people are interested to hear, that like you went through every step without getting that team, and then that team did start to open up doors for you, but you opened up the first one, and obviously your relationship with Jason Bateman allowed you to come over to Black Rabbit, which me and Nick were lucky to get an early preview of, which is so gritty, so fun. Jude Law and Jason Bateman playing brothers is like something I did not know I needed, but it is just phenomenal. And you directed episode 5 and 6, which we won't give away any big spoilers.
We're not allowed to.
Yes, but pivotal moments in these characters' trajectories. And what is it like coming in? You read all the scripts from 1 through 4, because obviously they were just like filming those episodes. What does that look like to come in, especially after Laura Linney directs too?
Yeah, and which was great that I had that relationship already with Laura, and a shorthand and ability sort of to. I mean, you would. I guess for somebody that might not have, you would have had a combination of both somebody that is a megastar and you're the director preceding you, which might have made it more uncomfortable or nerve-wracking to approach them, to have conversations, especially when some of the story overlaps between 4 and 5. But she's fantastic, and we have this long-standing relationship. In fact, when I started directing second unit on Stranger Things, Laura and I sort of shared, we coincidentally ended up in this house that was like a twin, and we would sit out on the deck and have breakfast together. She's terrific. And so, I came in, had read the first 4 episodes at whatever level those scripts were at when I'd first gotten them. But what was really amazing was Zach Balin and Kate Sussman, who were the showrunners and writers for the show, and incidentally married, were just these amazing collaborators. They sometimes showrunners have a very tight, especially first-time showrunners, and that's what they were. Very tight grip on story, and are nervous to deviate from whatever it was that they had put on the page. And Zach and Kate from day one were like, just tell us what you think, and I would. And I'd say, this is all great, but this one scene maybe could have more teeth, or I don't quite understand why this is happening. And there was never a time when I didn't share that critique or criticism that they didn't take it to heart, think about it, then make it their own, and bring back pages that tried to solve whatever my concern was, and then sort of yes-and it with something new and better than what I had maybe even suggested or pointed out. And it was, again, another Jason Bateman show. He directed the first 2 episodes. He sort of handpicked the team, in addition to Jude Law, whose company Riff Raff was also involved, and boy, they had assembled such an amazing team of creatives and crew and cast that were just all, it was just like Ozark. It was another high from both a behind the scenes experience and in terms of what you were putting out. Like I was pinching myself daily, you know?
And what does it look like when there's no previous season in that show? It's a limited series. So like, what was it like to be like, was there a bunch of storyboarding? What did it look like to get like everybody on the same page there?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've had the opportunity, fortunately, which I really like, to work on a lot of first season and or limited series shows, which is great because there's less guardrail, which I think's good. For me, it is. You're trying to do something that feels consistent, but at the same time, you feel like you can try things that might not fit a rule book because there's none to fit. On first season shows, they're trying to figure themselves out. So if you try something aesthetically that might feel slightly different than what happened before, oftentimes the audience accepts it maybe even a little easier than they would if it was season 5. But it also can sort of then become part of the rule book. And that's been really nice on shows that I've returned to for a second or third season. And they go, oh, hey, that, your episode 7 is sort of what we're trying now to do for the whole season. Wow, that's awesome to hear that. And, Jason and I had talked early on about the world sort of becoming more and more unstable. But beyond that, and I'm sure he had a similar conversation with the other directors, but beyond that, there wasn't a lot of crosstalk between the directors in terms of aesthetic or style. We had 2 cinematographers. Obviously, they're trying to help keep things tonally, aesthetically similar. But I really never found that anybody was sort of stepping in to say, that's not what this show is. That's not how it's done. And I feel like all of the blocks, Laura's block, Justin's block, Jason's block, they all have a real distinct feel to them, yet feel connected and continuous in a really good way. So I like that.
And is there one or a few scenes that you're really stoked for people to see? I think you can lean into like anything a little bit.
Okay, sure. So yeah, are there any episode scenes or
any scenes that you were really stoked to try something risky out on?
Well, yeah, I love both the episodes. 5 and 6 are very different episodes. But I particularly love the arc of 5. 5 is this really interesting arc where I was literally just at this dinner the other night with Jude, and we were talking about the end of 5. So at the end of 5, spoilers here, Jude and Jason end up in their boxers walking home from a near-death experience on the side of the BQE, and they get into a fight. Leading up to this, 5 is this amazing ride where the 2 brothers are a little bit at odds about what are they going to do now to save the day? And Jason has this harebrained idea to burn the house down. And Jude's like, no, I'm not going to do that. And then finally Jude realizes, well, maybe this is the only way to sort of get us out of this mess. And so the 2 brothers decide they're going to follow Jason's idea. But before they do, they're going to go sort of look through the attic, and they have this wonderful long scene. I mean, it's 7 or 8 minutes, I would wager, where the 2 of them, they sort of like go through all these different phases of their life, in this nostalgic way where they're looking back at things from their childhood in their attic bedroom, and they're talking about them. And then they're starting to sort of like open up about what's going on in their lives currently and how they feel about their lives and their future. And then they sort of talk about their father and their impact of their father on their lives. And then they burn the house down and they win ostensibly. They get the money they need from the insurance money, and they're on a high. And then it's quickly diffused by the information that Anna's dead. And then suddenly they're picked up by the bad guys, and now they're about to be killed in this warehouse on the waterfront. And then there we are, and they're walking back almost naked, and they have this fight. And the point being is that arc that we see in 5 is probably, and this is what I was talking to Jude about the other night, it's probably an arc that they've repeated over and over and over in their lives, over and over and over again. The difference being at in this one, Jason punches Jude. And it feels like maybe things just went one step too far, and this is the last time the two of them are going to have this kind of fight. And it is, right? I mean, if you watch the rest of the series, spoiler, sorry, it is the last time they're going to go through this cycle. Originally, the flashback that happens at the beginning of
when they're young, or when you have the young versions of them.
Exactly. At the beginning of 6, they have this scene with the watches where we learn about the watches. Originally, that was supposed to end 5. And so you would have this really heartbreaking moment and then go into the flashback, and it always felt like, oh man, this is the moment we end on. Jason walking off quietly, camera going slowly out of focus. It's not that typical cliffhanger moment you see in television. It's something sad, and we let you sort of sit in it. It's really powerful. And so Igor Martinovic, my cinematographer, because he saw that I was having trouble with this flashback ending the episode, he had this great idea of moving it to the next episode. And I pitched it to Zach and Kate, because they're such great collaborators, were like, yes. And it made perfect sense because 6 really bookends with the watch.
Yes, yeah. 6 is all about the watch. Yeah. Exactly. That's amazing. The show is phenomenal. We cannot wait for people to see this.
We're very excited for people to watch it.
Your episodes are just like standouts as far as like I feel like the gut punches that you
thank you.
Yes. Congratulations also. Like, oh my goodness, what a feat.
Oh, thank you. It's very sweet of you.
Before we lose you, because sometimes we forget to do this at the end, we just want to ask you really quick, if you have you only have to pick one, a high, a low, or a hell no from your time working in this industry that you would like to share.
Well, it's funny, when you talked about it earlier, what came to mind wasn't necessarily a one-off moment, but more something I talk about all the time. And I think it's sort of in keeping with the nature of your show, which is there were several times, and I remember one of them in particular, where I sat next to my wife early on in my career feeling like climbing that ladder was going to be impossible, feeling like I'd experienced too much rejection. And I said to her, I said, Erica, that's it. I'm done with this business. I'm going to hang it all up. I'm going to go get some sort of desk job and work a 9 to 5. And she just turned to me and she said, doing what? Who is going to hire you to do anything? What kind of desk job? You think you're just going to go get a desk job? What are you talking about? There's only one thing in this world that you're qualified to do and that you're good at, and it's this. And that happened a few times, but I remember this one time being the one that really got me over the hump. And within a few months of that, I think I had gotten my first big operating break on a big like NBC television show, and I was off to the races. But point being is, I think this is a really tough industry for relationships. If you find somebody that is willing to ride it out with you and is going to be that person to say, no, I know that we're suffering right now, we're not making any money, but you need to stay the course. Boy, hold on to that person. They're so important.
That's such a good one. Oh my God. That is your also soundbite. Send that to her.
Oh yeah. She'll hear it. I'm sure she will. She's a big fan.
Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I know that you're very, very busy. By the time that this episode comes out, Black Rabbit will be out, so everyone will be able to binge enjoy it on Netflix.